Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Mother's Oats Comix. These three issues, primarily by Dave Sheridan and Fred Schreier, though the later issues have a few guests, guest appearances. But I gotta say, these three issues are some of the best underground comics ever made. Definitely some of the most psychedelic undergrounds ever made. This is quite the heady brew that these two were laying down. Very trippy art, very trippy writing. Sometimes a little silly in its trippiness, where it's just babbling, but it's interesting babbling. It's pretty fun stuff. So Dave Sheridan and Fred Schreier were I think they lived in Ohio, and they fell in love with underground comics, so they go out to San Francisco sometime in whatever, 1960-something, hippie times. And they get to Rip Off Press. They submit their comic, Mother Oats #1, which is pretty much done. And they tell Jack Jackson, who was one of the co-owners, he said, we really like your stuff, Dave Sheridan, but that Fred Schreier guy's not ready. We just want to do a comic of yours. And luckily, Dave Sheridan said, no way, Jose. It's either both of us or forget about it. So Jack Jackson relented, and thank God he did. Because, Fred Schreier definitely is not the more accomplished cartoonist in the first issue. But within 1 year, that motherfucker, holy shit, you're going to see the change in his art. It's insane. And Fred Schreier became an outstanding cartoonist. So, it's going to be really interesting. You guys are going to flip when you see how different his art is. So here we have Mother Oats Comix #1. And we have a jam cover by Dave Sheridan and Fred Schreier. These guys never stinted. Even, Fred Schreier was a little crude at the beginning. Man, these guys, just every page is packed with eye candy and psychedelic noodling, and just it's amazing how much work they put into these comics. This cover, it's not the best. You can tell these are new guys. They're starting out, but it's a pretty damn colorful, fun cover. I wouldn't kick it out of my eye sockets. And we have all these fake ads. They're pretty funny. This is also a jam page. Getting old? Try LSD. Become a human water pipe. Parody of those old cartoonist schools by Bale things with Norman Rockwell, but Norman Gumfuddy. So the first story here, we have Dealer McDope. I believe this is the first appearance of Dealer McDope, who went on to be a long-running character for Dave Sheridan. So this is a solo strip by Sheridan. And our main character here is in disguise as this old lady. It looks like she just went grocery shopping. She's got a bag full of drugs in there. She's making drop-offs to this other drug guy in disguise as a nun. So when Dealer McDope gets home, he's relaxing. And I love this. All of a sudden, this rectangle pops out of reality. This is the kind of shit I would love when I was on LSD. So there's a hole in reality. We see from the other side it's just white. Then when he looks inside of it, I don't know if you can tell here, but that's his mouth. He's looking in, peering into this little rectangle, and it looks nuts in there. It's like complete geometric, psychedelic, explosion. And he looks in, he's like, wow. So then he looks down and he sees there's a doorknob on the other side. So he says, sure, why not? And he reaches his arm in and opens the door so he can fit through. And just look at this already. He's not even in the reality. It looks so fucking cool. So he grabs his bag of drugs and a bong, and or maybe it's a hookah, and he dives in. He takes the plunge. And we get to see this shit that is like, I wouldn't be surprised if Dave Sheridan grew up reading Steve Ditko's Doctor Strange, because this is totally like awesome Doctor Strange, Dormammu dimension shit going on. And remember, this is young Dave Sheridan. Already he's got so much chops going on. So he meets this cute little guy. Excuse me. His name's Petty Pooh. And I guess they have just it's a nicer reality where he is now. He's telling him, Petty Pooh can't even believe that drugs are illegal in his dimension. And Dealer McDopes, he's like, what? Drugs were declared illegal? All they do is make you see things that are great. And their consciousness expanding. So they're heading to the castle. He works for the king. And they go over this bridge and they can look down back into Dealer McDope's dimension. And he sees like just typical bullshit. These cops beating the shit out of some guy. So he introduces Petty Pooh to Dope. And Petty Pooh likes it. Man, just look at the ink slinging he's doing here. Every panel's got like 20,000 little hash marks and lines and shading. Crazy stuff. And so they get to the city that the king lives in. And it's this amalgam of San Francisco, Miami, and Oz. It's this wonderful city. So they meet the king. And he loves mushrooms. Basically, he gets all the best mushrooms for himself. He shares with everyone, but he always likes to try the newest mushroom. And I do mean psychedelic mushrooms, not edible mushrooms for cooking. So basically everyone in this country, in this dimension, they just trip all the time. They have a great time doing mushrooms. And we just see these tiny little panels all crammed with stuff. You could tell that they didn't realize the dimensions of an underground comic. They made it magazine size. That's why they have these huge borders and the art's a little cramped. I wish somebody would reprint this magazine size or even bigger, because man, there's so much to see here and some of it's so tiny. But it's pretty, more value for your dollar. Every page has got so much art on it, crammed in. So Dealer McDope takes up to the mushrooms, and he just has this wicked trip here. He's this giant clown. Hiya, kid, hiya. His arms are turning into just scribbles. And then look at this shit. This is before Photoshop. He just makes this amazing perspective winding with all these TV screens. Oh, then look at this shit. He's basically rocketing through the cosmos, having this amazing trip. So just beautiful psychedelic art, you know? He's not even putting in word balloons. He doesn't care. He's just trying to give you the experience of taking an awesome trip. So then he lands back in our reality in his apartment, and these cops come in. It's a bust. So Dealer McDope jumps out the window with his drugs. And he escapes. Man, that's some groovy shit. So here we got Fred Schreier. As you can see, it's definitely a different style. And this is the pornography section, early morning bathroom capers. And these two water faucets, one's male and one's female. And they have sex. And when the guy wakes up in the morning to brush his teeth, he's like, damn, faucet's limp again. Because the male faucet finished. Here's a one-pager from Dave Sheridan. We're doing this very rough style, but it's good cartooning. It's just this old square guy berating this hippie for, not going to Vietnam, for doing drugs, for not working. And he's just laying all this hate on this hippie. And then he walks away and the hippie just says, far out. So we got Fred Schreier. I think this shit's pretty damn good, especially compared to a lot of undergrounds. Yeah, definitely it's rough. But it also, the work he puts into it, and it's just really fun, crazy, psychological, weird, psychedelic stuff. So we see this narrator at the beginning, more mushrooms. And we see this guy, he's running to his mailbox. And he's like, yes, it's finally here. And this guy is kind of not a real human. He represents the conscience. So these ego trips are all like this kind of like mental landscape with all these characters representing different parts of the psyche. So he runs into his house. This is really unfortunate how tiny this is. I mean, really annoying. And he says, at last, my ego is back from the cleaners. So there's his ego, a weird little nebbish monster. And he just loves his ego. He's like, what do you want? Money? Sex? Food? I missed you, buddy. So he puts the ego to bed. He's very happy. But then this guy creeps into the bedroom at night. And he says, come on, you're coming with me, ego. Just leave a note. I gotta leave a note for your owner. So when he wakes up in the morning, the conscience, he finds a note. It's like, this is your id. I stole your ego. So now he's got to go on this quest to get back his ego. First, he meets the subconscious, this weird little looking person. And even though this is kind of, whatever, psychobabble craziness, it definitely has, a good sense of humor. So it kind of saves it from being just like, well, this is just too much, pretentious shit. So he keeps meeting all these parts of his brain. Look at this great little panel here. So tiny, though. So frustrating. He meets the imagination. The imagination berates him for valuing the ego so much. He's like, yeah, you guys always do that. Just love your ego. And then it has some more amazing panels. So, like, however rough this is, I can't, if I was Jack Jackson, I would have just shut up and been like, well, it's still pretty fucking cool. Like, just a panel like that. The cool work. Because, he probably knew that most of his readers, or half of them, are just hippies who are tripping out and wanting to see something groovy. So you'd think it'd be like, yeah, this is great. This will do the job. And you can tell he's got, he's got chops. All these people are well drawn, good anatomy. It's just, a little inconsistent. And the conscious is put on trial. A lot of this, to be honest, is a little over my head. It's very trippy. It really is made for people on LSD. Yeah, here he meets worry. He meets his libido, sitting here drooling, sticking his tongue out. The unconscious. So he still hasn't found his ego. He ends up in this weird hall of mirrors, in this weird outfit. And he jumps through a mirror. And I love this panel. Look at the perspective on this as he's floating through space. That's amazing. See, right then and there, I'd be like, yeah, this guy's a little crude, but what other cartoonist would draw such a cool panel? That's amazing. Once again, it reminds me of like Doctor Strange floating through the Dormammu dimension. I would totally steal that. If I was an artist for Doctor Strange, I would sample that basically and put Doctor Strange's cape on there. Yeah, just look at, just like Sheridan, so much lines. Just this little crafty design work he does. That must have taken so long. Now here we have another one-pager by Dave Sheridan. Once again, making fun of Nixon. In a way, this is almost sympathetic to Nixon, where he's got to deal with all these hassles. All of his advisors are like, we got an emergency in Vietnam. These people need to see you about disposable bottles. They want to have deposits. So Nixon kind of takes care of everything. He's like, take some of that money from Vietnam, start an anti-litter fund. And then he says, he kind of bemoans the fact that he went through so much shit to become president. And then really all it is, that it's just a bunch of fucking hassles. I like this fake ad. Tired of being skinny? Put on hundreds of pounds the fun way today. I really dig fat guys, says this beautiful woman. And basically all it is this giant, what is it, a tanker of food. It's a freight train full of food. And basically it's just eat a lot. Eat really shitty food and you'll get fat. And then naked ladies will want to rub their hands through your hair. And I believe this is another jam comic between the two guys. Or it could be Fred Schreier alone. So there you have it, the first issue. And, I think that's a cool as fuck underground. But wait till you see number 2. Number 2, this is like, I think one of the best undergrounds ever made. So we go number 2. Covered by Sheridan and Schrier. Actually, let me double check on this. I took a photo of the underground thing. What is it called? Comics Joint. Oh, it's Dave Sheridan solo cover. Just totally cool, bizarro shit. So we have this weird inside front cover by Dr. E. Ambrose. Obviously, probably a pseudonym, pen name, but according to Comics Joint, they don't know. So it's just listed as Dr. E. Ambrose. And these are just actually like real facts. Just kind of weird, annoying things. Okay, here's what I'm talking about. So this is like a year later, I think. Fucking Fred Schreier, man. He's, look at the improvement here. Oh, and by the way, guys, Mother Oats number 1, 1969. I should have mentioned that. But look at the craft on display here. I hope you're watching this on your smart TV. A short peek at the human thinking process that might help explain some of those Freudian slips. And we see this dude slipping. And I like this word salad and the reflection in this pond. It says solipsism. But look at this crazy, beautiful architecture. How much lines that is. It's just nuts. I wonder if these guys did speed. So we see the deep woods. Beautifully drawn tree. Look at this art. This is all Fred Schreier. And I'm pretty sure it's just a year after that last thing you saw. This kind of hippie guy comes out of the tree. Oh my God, every panel. I just want to drool over this. His reflection, just perfectly drawn perspective on these weird angles and stuff. And it gets really like philosophical and psychedelic and trippy. Once again, this is kind of like about the brain. It says right here, with his sidekick cognition, logic dashes off towards the memory, the warehouse of the mind. And look at this. Amazing. I'm glad they got the proportions right this time. So even though it's incredibly dense, it looks like it's the size it's supposed to be. Still would love to see this like in a giant edition from the original art, if it still exists. So this guy's got to deliver a thought across the brain to the speech center. So basically, you have a thought, and it takes like a microsecond through your electrons or whatever neurons to get to your mouth and to speak it. So he goes off, and it's going to be a dangerous mission. The entire stretch of the imagination is crossed by the thought as it proceeds through the cranium. And he's stretched out. Kind of cute little wordplay. I don't know who this frog's supposed to be in the brain, but it's beautifully drawn. He has to pass the unconscious. And just a lot of obnoxious creatures are here in the unconscious. And they want to stop this thought. I'm not quite sure why. For some crazy psychedelic reason. It's like, I feel like I'd have to take a Psych 101 course in college to fully understand this comic. So the thought's on his way, and they ambush him. These beings of the unconscious. And just look at this crazy playfulness, with experimenting. These weird panels, like very kind of MC Escher, but weirder. They're popping in and out of reality. But still, it's kind of comic panels, but all like kind of warped. Once again, he's jumping out of the panel into this beautifully drawn, like psychedelic, groovy shit. And they capture the guy and they smush him. I think they hit him on the head with a club. And the package, which is the thought, goes free like a football. So they're all rushing to the speech center. Area of assimilated emotional and logical responses. And all of a sudden, a lot of them are on a roller coaster. They're on bicycles, but they're all jumping over this cliff like a bunch of lemmings. And look at this amazing lettering here. Boing, tilt, ding, all different styles, all incredibly shaded and three-dimensional. So these guys are all plummeting to their death. Now we see that hippie who came out of the tree at the beginning of the story. And he's just commenting on the whole situation. It's like having a lemming migration in your head. Oh, just so gorgeous. And that's the end. He's sitting there. It seems like anticlimactic. It seems like he's all thinking of something. He's about to say something important. But that's it. But, I really don't care. I could just stare at the art forever. He was a nice guest appearance by Jack Jackson. Speaking of which, the guy who was going to not hire Fred Schreier. And this is a cool little comic. I love this early Jack Jackson when he was really drawing with lots of lines. Look at the faces on these guys. Some of his early slow death comics were drawn this way. And we see these prisoners. They're all old men. It seems like they've been there most of their lives. And they're like, hey, we should free ourselves. And they realize that the door to the prison has been open all this time. The front gates are open. They're running fast because they're like, they'll be after us soon. But we cut away to the guard tower. They're just skeletons, the guards. So they've been dead for who knows how long. And these guys could have, escaped any time. Obviously, this is some kind of parable, So they see a spaceship, and they're like, oh, God has delivered this to us. God be praised. And as they run towards it, these like space guns just obliterate these guys. And the robot alien on board says, men of vision have lousy eyesight. That's a nice 2-pager. Here we got a precursor to Fred Schreier's Balloon Vendor comic, which is a solo comic he did a few years after this. But this is just Mean Mr. Mustard, the balloon salesman. Just look at this. Just wonderful cartooning. And he just basically sells balloons to kids, even though it drags them up into the stratosphere. He doesn't care. He's like, get rid of these annoying kids. Just the design work on his cloak. This little foo-fara here for no good reason, just because, yeah, these guys must have been on speed, I think. Here we have another Dealer McDope comic. And Dealer McDope's going to Mexico to score a bunch of weed. And there's this old weed dealer there and his young girlfriend, and they want to retire. So he basically says, dude, you're my best customer. I'm going to sell all of this weed to you. It's like acres of weed. So he's just got a little truck, Dealer McDope. So he calls up his friends, and he gets all these 18-wheelers, and they come up with this elaborate plan to get it through customs, through the border. And they basically send the little truck ahead, and the truck is burning pot through the smokestack. So all the guards are just so stoned, they don't care. They're like, I don't even remember what we were supposed to do with that truck. Who cares? And they're just waving at him as they drive by. Trucks full of demon weed to corrupt the youth of America. So that's Sheridan once again, solo. And now we have a word from our sponsor. And this is kind of making fun of like the nouveau rich hippies. Like the guy who started Rolling Stone. There was all these hippies who were like celebrity hippies who were just like pretty much just in it for the money, it looked like. It seemed like they really didn't have any hippie ideals at all. Almost like they're yuppie hippies. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to lead up to this page. Oh, and I should mention, this is another guest appearance. This is the great team of Tom Veitch, writer, and Greg Irons, penciler. They contributed to this too. And so this other guy who's given the Richie Rich one shit, he says, don't touch that panel, stop. He's like yanking on the panel. And it breaks it, and he says, look, all the little dots are escaping. And then I don't know what the hell's going on here, but it's fucking awesome. They both get sucked into this psychedelic maelstrom, and they're all warping and changing. The rich guy's saying, Christ, I think it's time to transcend the gross flesh. And he's just turning into this amorphous, disgusting blob. Oh, that's some groovy shit. I can totally imagine reading this on LSD too. Or mushrooms, it would have been amazing. Here we got another Fred Schreier, Bubble Blowers. And we see this guy waiting in a crowded, traffic-ridden city. And all of a sudden he hears like this rumble. And he's transported to this other kind of magical land. And this guy is blowing a giant bubble with one of those bubble pipes. And it gets bigger and bigger. And it floats off to the sky. And then the guy from our, the nerdy guy, he gets shoved back to our reality. And even though it's the same shitty reality with all this traffic and pollution, he's like skipping along with all these weird sound effects. Croak, bort, fritter, punt. So, I don't know, some kind of message is in there, I'm sure. So this is Dave Sheridan and this next trip, the Funhouse. This is high dudgeon. I think they used to say that in olden days. He's really kicking out the jams, motherfuckers. So it says, my story begins as I sit in my subterranean studio scrawling out the most twisted of drawings. So it's almost like Dave Sheridan's, it's an autobio in a way, or a fake autobio, because it gets very fucking weird. And he's seeing all these unspeakable weird things. And then this Amazon comes out. She emerges from the depths of a long-forgotten void. Oh, man, such a good drawing. And then this guy shows up, Herculespetix Glitch. The alchemist from 2B. It's his neighbor. And he basically has been doing experiments. And the result is he made this wicked weed. Glitch's Gold. So he shares it with, I guess, Dave Sheridan. We could call him the narrator. And they go on a crazy trip. I haven't done psychedelics in like decades, but I still love this kind of shit. Just like total imagination. You know, even if it doesn't have a plot. I really love writers who write great plots, great characters, but I also love stuff like this. Because basically this is showing me something I could never see anywhere else. They're giving me something I would never see on my own. And I'm not an artist, so even if the idea I couldn't draw it, I could convey it. Especially not this well. Doing more playing with the storytelling. How these guys are like on top of the panels. Almost like they're in the fourth dimension. Or I guess the third dimension. These guys are in the second dimension. Very much like that Thunder Dogs by Hunt Emerson. I wonder if he read this comic when he was a youngster. Just look at this craziness. They're on this choo-choo train. Look at this. The tracks are just like a dragon's tail. The train is just such animated cartooning. It's really good stuff. All this crazy design work here. And I think it's kind of like Nazi guys show up. And I guess they're in this place where they're in charge. The Botomian Protectorate. So this does not seem like a good trip now. So in this world, basically everyone's guilty. And almost everyone is, according to them, breaking the law. You basically can't help but break the law, because there's laws about everything. You're standing too long in that spot. You're executed. Of course, they have a different take on it. They say, our citizens have a wonderful freedom to know exactly where they stand under the law. So they're taken to court, and they're not taking it very seriously. They're just chatting amongst themselves. And they catapult them. That's their punishment. It looks like they're giant spoons. Oh my God, I forgot about this page. God, guys, I wish you could, I could magnify this for you 5 times. Hopefully you're watching it on a smart TV, and I hope you have a big one. This is just... I've shown you a bunch of times on this channel how, like, some cartoonists, ranging from hacks to pretty good ones, love to do those, like, MC Escher homages, you know? And this is beyond anything Escher ever conceived. This is so dense and crazy. Just playing around with perspective and... Oh, man, it's just amazingly dense. I was rereading this last night for the first time in a while, and this page I was just looking at for like 5-10 minutes. Just finding new things in every little inch. So then he comes back to his little studio, him and the alchemist, and they jump off the drawing board. And Dave Sheridan says, "Oh, I better put this down on paper before I forget this crazy trip." So it's almost like a circle. You know, he's now drawing the comic that we just saw him experience. So this is a cartoonist I'd never heard of before, S. Lipney, Madame Olga. Apparently she's in the Dearly McDope universe. She knows him. And she's this old, kind of like gypsy fortune teller woman. And things aren't going good for Dealer McDope. And nobody's buying his weed. His food stamps are late. But she gives him some good predictions. She says, "Oh, your girlfriend's coming back. You're going to get a lot of money." But then the last panel, she's just saying, "You look so run down between the reefer and the vegetables you eat. Just eat a little meat." So she's just like an old, typical lady of that time. Just like, eat some meat. This is this guy, Marx. That's all Comics Joint knows of this guy. This is kind of nice design work. It's a kind of an attack at organized religion. "You too can unremittingly smote, trample, rant, and maim. With the Reverend Pius Purvis on his divine crusade to deliver merciful vengeance." That's, I hope you like that as much as I did. That's one of my favorite undergrounds. Just beautiful stuff. Well, I guess it's, there's lots of beautiful comics out there. I love just how mind-bending it is and psychedelic. Like, you're not going to find that anywhere outside of, like, a Rick Griffin comic or Robert Williams when he was more trippy. So we have number 3. And I'm sorry, once again, let me see if there's a copyright in this. I should look this up. Sorry about that. It looks like this comic came out in 1971 from all the copyrights. So I guess this is a couple years after number 1. Now, this one came out in 1976. Mother Oats number 3. Fred Schreier had gone off to join the Peace Corps. Kind of wasn't drawing comics much anymore. But then he came back and was like, yeah, I still want to draw some comics. So he got the band back together. I'm pretty sure this cover is Fred Schreier solo. But I could be wrong. If it's not, it's definitely Sheridan and Schrier. So we have some more guests in this issue. We have a few of these Nerds strips, and they're credited to Sheridan and Shelton. So Dave Sheridan and Gilbert Shelton collaborated on this comic, The Nerds. Oh, I'm sorry, this came out in 1977, it looks like. 1977. And they're these aliens, the nerds, and they just kind of like talk about the foibles of mankind. They're kind of they're just trying to be gag strips, you know. Not that funny. So Dearly McDope's Back by Dave Sheridan. 20,000 kilos beneath the sea. And yeah, Dave Sheridan is definitely his craft is increased. This is a really weird comic because Dearly McDope once again is scamming, doing this big operation to get all this weed. And Father Guido Sarducci is a character in this comic. I don't know if you remember him. He was on Saturday Night Live. The actor Don Novello created this character. And he was kind of like this weird, shady priest. He worked for like the Vatican Gossip magazine. And he actually appears in the story. Very strange. So they do this elaborate plot where they're going to get some old decommissioned submarines, Nazi submarines down in Argentina. And that's how they're going to transport the pot right under the noses of the Coast Guard. So they got all these subs. There's Father Guido Sarducci. Does a pretty good likeness. So they go to Mexico, buy all this weed. And then basically the signal, when they know that they're ready, is Father Guido Sarducci is going to be on Saturday Night Live. They don't say it by name, but that's where he was on almost every week. And he says this like coded message. It just sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook. So they're like, okay, it's ready. Oh, they also hired these dolphins to help them lug the stuff. And the dolphins are unionized, so they collectively bargain for some good money. So these have torpedoes, these old subs that still work. So basically what they do is just torpedo all the weed right into these trucks that are waiting at the shore, into these little slots, using these ramps. So I kind of like these Dealer McDope stories. I don't smoke pot. I never dealt pot, but he always has these clever, kind of fun stories. They almost kind of remind me of like an Uncle Scrooge comic, you know? He's always traveling to these distant lands, getting in these crazy, elaborate adventures. Oh, here we got Fred Schreier. The Line. And this is about life after death. Look at that beautiful logo. It looks like he's been reading lots of like early Kurtzman. A lot of the looseness of these characters. It's really appealing. It's really nice cartooning. So we see this guy. He just died. And they're basically like, okay, you got to jump back into another body. You got to reincarnate. He's like, what? I don't even have time to rest? I just died. Like, yeah, you got to get a body soon. So he goes floating off in this kind of void, heading towards the place where you get put into a new life. There's actually ads. People trying to lure people like, hey, next time you come back, try Earth. Visit the Crab Nebula. Yeah, it's definitely Fred Schreier's style. Has got a lot like lighter, I guess. I mean, still crazy amounts of shading and line work, but it's a little more open. Like a panel like that, even though it's a lot of work went into it, it's just more open. So he has to make a little body out of clay. The body that he's going to, be reincarnated as. He falls on it and kind of ruins it. So he's basically bargaining with these guys. And they're like saying, okay, you could come back as a well-loved dog with a nice family. You come back as this or that. This is what I'm going to do. I can offer you 50 years in New York, but you have to join the army and your wife will be fat. It's very silly. I can laugh at that joke because I'm fat. So don't give me shit about it. And then he ends up being reincarnated as a little calf. A cute little cow calf. Because he just jumps. He just gets so tired of all this haggling, he just says, fuck it. And he just takes a wild leap. He could have come back as anything. It looks like by the dates of all these comics, some of them are from 74 they were drawn. So I guess these guys had, these comics sitting around for quite a while. 3 years at least. Here's Goose by Dave Sheridan. This is just about this asshole guy he's kind of a fun guy, but he's always mooching off his friends and always being a jerk and always causing trouble. Kind of a fun character. I wouldn't mind reading more stories about Goose. And I almost wonder, it almost seems like autobiography, like Dave Sheridan really knows this guy. Because we see Dave Sheridan in his drawing board. Oh, I'm sorry, but he does call him Jack, so never mind. Yeah, he's just a zany nut, this guy. But pretty obnoxious. Inimitable Aluminum. Another Fred Schreier one. Really beautiful cartooning in this. Once again, he's talking about the mind. Cross-section of human head. Demon who peddles mouth. And so this jester guy is telling the king and queen, the king is concentration. And he says, call out memory. And the king has to say, inimitable aluminum 10 times fast. And he's not very bright, so he just starts off pretty good, but then he can't do it. So Fred Schreier loved to make these little comics, just all about imagining the mind, giving personas to all the parts of the mind. Look at that nice pointillism, beautiful shading. Yeah, Dave Sheridan was the master of that pointillistic stuff. One day we'll look at Tales of the Leather Nun. Really great comic. So this is Marijuana Imagery, an illustrated experiment, written by Ron Siegel, this page, and then drawn by Dave Sheridan. And there's Dearly McDope again. I really like how this is a little more loose, more cartoony than the other one. So I don't know if this is about a real scientific experiment or not. But they did this marijuana experiment. And let's see where we are here. And he's just talking kind of like gobbledygook, like over-intellectualized, nonsense. But it's all beautifully drawn. I like that. So they're just in these experiments, they're asking patients what they see when they trip. And I guess there's artists there, almost like police sketch artists, who could draw it while it's fresh in their minds. So apparently a lot of people see these geometric shapes. Some people see scenes from childhood. They see strong emotional memories, viewing events as if from underwater, and seeing old memories from aerial perspectives, which he shows an example of each of these. And then talking about how songs, like during the experiment, if they played a song, the lyric Excuse me. The lyric would definitely alter their trip. So it's like, it's so very lonely. You're 2,000 light years from home. All of a sudden, he's on a flying carpet out in outer space. He's listening to Jefferson Airplane. And all of a sudden, he's seeing all this Alice in Wonderland imagery. She comes in colors by the Rolling Stones. Sees this beautiful hippie chick and her hair is turning into a rainbow. Was that the name of the song? She's a rainbow, yeah. And that's pretty much where it ends. Just very trippy stuff. Not very linear. Stupid stories. And this guy lives on the side of a volcano. He really enjoyed it. Very peaceful. But he had an ulcer. So his doctor said you should go to some island paradise. So it'll be just as peaceful. But he won't be near a volcano. And he wanted to return to his cabin near the volcano, though. And the day he gets back, the volcano erupts. And the guy's running away saying, if that don't beat all. So it's pretty honest. It's a very stupid story. But it's Fred Schreier and beautiful cartooning, so I don't really care. More Fred Schreier. Freeway Burger. And this is about this burger place that just makes the most disgusting hamburgers. And the worse he makes them, the more people want to gobble them up. He puts linoleum tiles instead of cheese on the burgers. Pretty good satire, because you can imagine back then seeing the rise of McDonald's, their shitty little hamburgers, how popular they were. I guess you'd assume it's like, God, the American palate is terrible. It's like we'll go out of our way to get really shitty food. Another Dealer McDope story, Deep Trouble. And the small town sheriff pulls over Dealer McDope. He's got all this weed. Dealer does. And this is inside Dealer McDope's mind. The panic here. But luckily, he's just about to open the packages. Some guy speeds by at 130 miles an hour. So he jumps in his car. Here we got Chickens by Fred Schreier. I don't know if I mentioned the last story. Obviously, once again, Dave Sheridan. He does all the Dealer McDope stories. And this is talking about how we love chickens so much that, we keep figuring out ways that they can propagate faster. With, huge chicken farms, upping the reproduction rate to a disastrous degree. It's gotten to the point where soon will no longer be a question of selling them for profit, but eating them to survive, because they're going to overrun us. It's basically like there's so many chickens being born that if we don't keep eating them, they will totally just overpopulate the planet. And he has this scenario where, if something happens where, like the oil crisis, people can't go out to get chicken anymore. The chickens will just totally overrun these factories. They'll get in the way of the machinery, clog it up. The government will basically say, every citizen has to eat 15 chickens a day to keep their population down, and everyone's getting sick of chicken. And then it says civilization will be pecked flat. Coop condominiums, seed, nest egg apartments. So it looks like the chickens have taken over the earth. Very silly. Here's two more nerd strips by Sheridan and Schrier. And this one, it appears that they meet Patty Hearst or someone like her. And this one, they crash some guy's house to rob him, but there's nothing to steal. And when the occupant comes home, it's the governor of California. Now, this is a very pleasant surprise, a very rare treat. This is B. Claban. It says A. Blink, but obviously you could, jumble the letters around. And this is very weird. I almost wouldn't recognize this B. Claban by the art style, but just by the weird poses of these people, it's so Claban. Just these people dancing, doing the mystery dance in different levels of nudity or not, but they're getting down. They're doing the fandango. But it's, this is beautiful shit. And I don't think little stuff like this was ever reprinted in any of his books. So just getting a page of B. Claban art, wonderful. Here's another stupid story by Fred Schreier. And this is just about a guy who, there's this house and noise in his house that's bothering him. He tears apart his whole house. It just doesn't stop. He can't find where the noise is coming from. And until he has no house left. And then at the end it says he never did discover what had caused the sound. So I guess that was the shtick of these. They really are stupid stories, which I kind of like that idea now. Just telling really dumb stories. And one more Fred Schreier one-pager in full color. I kind of like these trippy, weird, they're kind of fuzzy colors. And this is a homage to the 60s. Just showing these 250 squares all getting caught up in the 60s on a surreal level. Almost like a crash course where this guy's all like, come here, put on these clothes, go to this rally. You got to listen to these bands. And so like within a day, they're all hippies. And they run screaming from the 60s because just all these crazy things happen. And they're running to the 70s. And it says, don't worry, get your credit cards right here. You're going to need them. Because, the 70s was a much more materialistic time. The hippies got rid of their ideals and sold out. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed them. Mother Oats Comix 1 through 3. These guys did a bunch of other comics. There's a comic called Meef, M-E-E-F. Track that down too. Beautiful stuff. Schreier's got his solo balloon vendor. And both of these guys were in many other, comic book anthologies from the underground press. But this was their main forum. And some really good stuff. Highly recommended. So I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope that you return here at the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.